Alice training. This is going to be a little different than what we normally do our training as. We're going to try to do this as a video PowerPoint. So like I said, welcome, Alice training. During this training, we're going to discuss how we can increase survivability by empowering individuals to participate in their own survival skills. We are going to look at situational and environmental awareness, along with the options we can use to respond to an alert. This training will help us prepare for violent critical incidents, VCI. So you'll see that later. This course has been designed with the trauma-informed training in mind. So Alice, right? Alice is an active shooter response program that consists of awareness and communication, and response and option strategies. The awareness and communication strategies consist of situational awareness, right? So this is whenever we're alerting others. Situational awareness is your perception of your environment and how you comprehend and respond to that environment. Alert is the information you are providing to others so that they can choose the best strategy for their own safety and survival. Now, the response options, they are how to respond during being alerted that there's a danger. The strategy options that fall under response are evacuate, removing yourself from the danger, right? Lockdown, which is barricading, in your location or in a location, and then countering. And we're going to talk about that. But countering is whenever you need to counter maybe an intruder's ability to use their weapon to give yourself and others time to evacuate. In today's class, we are going to dive into this so you can be prepared for a VCI. So let's start with awareness and communication, with situational awareness. Situational awareness, right? We talked about this. So situational awareness is observing your surroundings. That's an important part of being aware of your environment and the people in that environment. Knowing your environment can provide you an extra time to perform a strategy in the event of a VCI. So situational awareness, right, is your perception of your environment and how you comprehend the meaning of your perception, and what will happen to your perception in the future based on decisions you make. Your vision needs to look at two areas of that location. The building structure, right? Where are your normal exits? Doors, hallways. Are they near your final location? Or is there distance that you want to travel to get there? Your non-normal exits, right? These are whenever you got to think outside the box, right? Like windows can be used as an exit if you need to. Remember, like how to break a window. I think we've seen a video about that. If not, I'll make sure that we add that to this as well. But we'll also discuss it in our live. So you want to look outside of the windows and see where those lead to. Like what's below you, what's around it. Is there an edge? Is it a roof? If it is a roof, how do you get down? Is it concrete? Is it grass? So just making sure like we're looking at all the things around us. And, part of that is that if you're on a second story, if you hang off that ledge, right, you can get about 5 feet before you have to make that fall. So just knowing that there are other exits besides just your traditional doors and your hallways and things like that. Take a minute, look around you, think about it. Where would you go? What would you do? So, comprehending the meaning behind your perception. The other thing is too, right? Like the other thing is that we got to think about is people. How many people are in your area? What are they doing? Do their actions fit the type of location that you are in? Is there anyone who is acting differently, not like the others? Take a note of the details of the person and the appearance and the behavior to potentially remember later. What are they wearing? What are they doing with their hands? How are they acting? What are they looking at? Right? So how you comprehend the meaning behind your perception will guide the decisions and the outcomes you make in an emergency. Having situational awareness is just the beginning of your safety. So remember that. Whenever you're looking around things, just remember situational awareness. And we're going to talk about right now, Cooper color code of awareness. So right now there's 5 colors to Cooper color code of awareness: white, yellow, orange, red, and black. So we're going to go through each of these. White. So white is you're unaware, you're unprepared. People in white are oblivious to their environment. Someone talking on their phone or not paying attention. How many times have you seen an individual walking around looking at their phone and not paying attention to what is going on around them? Right? I'll think about this like with my kids and their iPad whenever they're using it. They have no clue what's going on. Right? Sometimes it's like you'd have to be like, hey, pick your head up. You're going to walk into that wall. Right? This is white. You're so unaware, unprepared. You have no idea what's going on around you. We don't really want to live in white. So yellow is you are relaxed and alert. People in yellow are aware of their environment, right? Including others around them, walking around with their head up, taking in the surroundings, making quick eye contact with others as you pass, observing the body language. It's difficult to surprise a person in yellow, which is where we want to live. Right, this is where we should be able to respond if there's something that happens. We probably want to live in yellow. That's what I always tell people. Yellow is a really good place to be. You're relaxed, you're not on edge, but you're alert, right? Next we have orange. So you have a sense of danger, right? And you start to evaluate and formulate a plan on how to respond to that feeling. This could be a lockdown. This could be evacuating if you're using the ALEC strategies. You hear a noise in the middle of the night and you wake up. You start thinking about the noise. What could it be? Is it in the house? Is it a house pet? Do you go back to sleep? Do you go check it out? If it's one of your children getting up sick, maybe you go and assist, right? What if it's an intruder who wants to take all your stuff? Do you wait or do you formulate a response to all those thoughts, right? So right now it's like we want to evaluate. Orange, we're a little heightened, right? We're making decisions. So we're formulating a plan. So that's where we're at whenever we're in orange. Red, right? Red is the danger is real, right? You're responding to the threat within your environment. Your training kicks in. You're responding accordingly. You're walking down the sidewalk where the big dog comes out and starts growling at you, then lunges at you. You look around, you try to find an avenue of escape, right? You take the route and you run to safety. Red is whenever it is real. Like this is whenever you're all that training and your plan that you've been formulating back in orange, right? This is whenever red, you're like, I'm going to put that plan into place. So just remember, whenever you get to red, it's time to act. You want to act. You don't want to get to black, right? Black is the breakdown of mental and physical response to danger. A person in black is not prepared for anything, right? They haven't prepared for the violent critical incident, right? They're not able to respond. People in black, what we call it, right? They just freeze, and they black out. That's why it's black, right? They black out to the situation, and they're really no help to anyone. They're no help to themselves, and we don't want to get to black. And so that's why it's important to formulate plans in orange, right? And then whenever the danger does happen in red, we act, but we don't want to get to the point that we get to black. Because no information or know how to respond or things like that, stress just gets really overwhelmed and the brain shuts down. So we don't want to live in black. That's one thing that we try to avoid. If anything, let's not get there, right? So we're going to talk about the training and the way for ALEC training for an active shooter. So that way, hopefully, if this ever does occur, which I hope it never does, right? But just in case it does, if it ever does occur, then our training is going to kick in and we're going to stay out of this black. We do not want to black out. So, right, Cooper color code of awareness. We got white, nobody knows what's going on. Yellow, it's kind of where we want to live, right? We're alert, we're relaxed, we're not on edge, right? We're not stressed, there's not anxiousness, right? Orange is like we're heightened, we're always formulating a plan. We always want to know what's going on next. Like if there is danger, where's it going to be? And then red, right, is when the danger does happen. We need to act on the plan that we have formulated in orange. And black is not where we ever want to get to. All right, we never want to black out. We always want to trust our training. We always want to trust our surroundings. We don't want to get to black. We don't want to black out. All right. So next, we're going to talk about alert. This is the initial awareness received by your senses. It's the first notification of danger, right? So the alert is a stimulus, either auditory, visual, etc., that you are receiving from your senses in your environment. This is why it's important to have situational awareness and to be in yellow when you're outside of your house. It's important when you receive an alert, you accept it and respond to it. Often people that are not had training or experience will rationalize the alert. So they're going to think, oh, this isn't real, right? This can't be real. This is fake news, right? This is not a real danger. But we want to take every situation and make sure that we are doing our due diligence to rule out that it's not a real danger. Don't just think it's not, right? Use your senses. Use your alert. So, hearing. Hearing is a sense that you may receive an alert by. So what are you hearing that would alert you to danger? So think about that. Take a minute. Answer to yourself. I know it's a little different than, in a classroom setting, but we're watching this. But think to yourself, what are things that you may hear? All right. Did you say gunshots, maybe? People screaming, right? Alarms, different noises. So those are things that we may hear, right? What about seeing? Your eyes, right? In my opinion, seeing and hearing are probably the two most important senses when it comes to realizing danger, right? You hear danger, you see danger, right? So it's like, I'm hearing these things and then I'm seeing these things. So what are some things that you may see during this danger? Okay. Think about it. Say it out loud. Say it to yourself. All right. So what you may be seeing is an intruder, right? Someone who has a weapon walking down the hall. Somebody across the parking lot. People moving. People running. You know, people, running towards you, screaming, yelling. Those are things like, so you're seeing things. And to be honest with you, whenever you see things, you need to start processing those things, right? So you need to start processing. Okay, what am I seeing? And then whenever you go to alert others, you need to make sure that you are giving accurate information, right? So what about some of your other senses that maybe we may use that we don't think about, but smelling? Like, what about with your nose, right? Like, what are some things maybe in a dangerous situation that you may smell, right? So in an active shooter, you may smell gunpowder. You may smell what appears to be smoke, right? You may even see some smoke coming from different areas, but just the smell of gunpowder. Remember, if you smell things like this, don't just take it for granted, right? Make sure that the threat isn't real before you don't react. So same thing too. Everybody says, right, whenever they're hearing, what do they hear whenever active shooter goes off, right? Everybody's always says the same thing. Well, I thought it was fireworks. Well, how often do you have fireworks that are going off in your office, right, or in your either way? If there's fireworks going off in your office, you probably don't. You want to stay away from that area, or you want to make sure that you're removing yourself from that, because it's like people always say that, I thought it was fireworks. I thought somebody's putting off fireworks. Well, listen, I know some of us are crazy, but at the same time, I don't think any of your coworkers are going to be bringing any fireworks to work and putting them off, right? So, touch, right? What are you touching, right? What are your things that you may receive for an alert for touch or, taste, right? You may not use these, right? But you may You may, in different other circumstances for other dangers, like if you're, if there's a fire, you want to touch the doors, make sure they're not hot, right? But for the active shooter training that we're going over today, if you can think of a way that maybe you can use touch or taste or things like that, let me know next time you see me. All right, technology. Technology can be a part of the alert strategy as well. So, what information are you receiving from PA systems, text messages, apps? So for us, the one thing that we are going to use is we have a paging system on our phone. We have Text Magic that texts all of our employees. So those are different alert technologies that we have that our emails or chats, those sort of things. So different technology apps or things that we have that can help with alerting the people to stay away. Hey, there's danger here, don't come here. Hey, this is where the shooter is, don't come this way. Things like that. So we need to utilize that technology that we have. Information, right? This is talking about the things that we're getting alert to, and then we're putting it into information that is valuable. So information is the continuation, right, of alert and communication. Information is what we are providing to others. The information may come from an intercom system, an app, right? Those things that we just talked about, the page system, text magic. When you're providing the information, it's important to not use code words. So code words will not provide enough information to know what response strategy is needed to be taken for survivability. Use plain language. Use this to provide information to others. Think about your own organization. Think about us, right? How are you able to inform others if something were to happen in your building? What are we doing, right? Are we running through the halls and screaming and saying, shooters this way, right? Like what? How are you going to react if somebody would come into our building? How are you going to spread that information? What do we do, right? I think that we try to use our page system. I know that we're working on getting that put on our phones, right? I think some of our smaller offices, we can use word of mouth. We can use the verbal communication. But the other thing is you want to provide real-time information. Not, well, the shooter was here 5 minutes ago, right? Where's it at now? What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we doing, right? Real time. No code words, right? Like we said. So don't, I know that we talked about, and I know in different settings that I've been in, like code silver is, the code word that they use for active shooter, but it's like, what's something that you think of whenever you think of code silver? Not only just that, but what I think of is like silver alerts, right? If you're in the hospital setting, let's say, and somebody's like code silver, right? You're going to think, man, is a grandma or a grandpa lost? And maybe I need to go help them. Where in reality is that could be that's the active shooter code, and that you may be walking into danger. So let's try to stay away from code words. Let's in an active shooter situation, let's stay away from that. Let's use plain language. Let's say there's a person with a gun, there's a person with a rifle, there's a person, right? There's a man. Like, give as much information as you can. There's a woman. He's white. He's African American. Whatever it may be, use the plain language to be able to explain the situation, right? So, what providing the information allows individuals, like we talked about, to know what they need to do. Are they evacuating, right? Where's the threat? Are we locking down because it's closed? If we're locking down, how do we lock down? We'll talk about that too, right? Multiple options that we can do during an event, but we need real-time alert information to be able to make the judgment call on our end to be able to protect ourselves, right? To be able to evacuate or lock down, whatever is the best. So based upon this training, we allow you in this training to make the decision that is going to be best for you. So we talked about, right, PAs. We don't have a PA system, but we do have text and we do have the page. So those are different ways that we can send this information, right? Sending information. We talked about this. Plain language. Something that everyone will know. Provide the following information, right? We talked about that. What's your location? If you're calling, right, then if you're the one that you're in a safe space and you're calling, 911, that's one thing that we got to think about. Not everybody if you are in a safe place, it's okay to call 911. Don't just assume that somebody else is going to, right? And if you have information, right? Call 911. What was the intruder wearing? How tall are they? Right? Like, where are they going? What weapon do they have? What is it? It says in a classroom or, and providing information to an office, right? Like, what office are you in? What location of the building are we in, right? If we're looking, in our Oakland office and we're thinking about that, like, okay, are they on side B, right? Are we on side A? Are they back in the behavioral room? If we're thinking down in Westernport, right? Are they in the pharmacy area? Are they in the lab? Are they back in the BH corner back there in Westernport? Like, just thinking, like, if you're calling and telling people, calling 911 and providing that information, it's good. All right, like, all right, so I don't know if you know, but I assume that you know. This is Aaron giving this class. How would you describe me, right? Think about that for a second. So if I would walk in to your office or to your setting or to your place, right? And how would you describe me? If you were going to be calling the police, right? A little bit under 6 foot, right? Tan skin, right? Like, depending on what I'm wearing that day, right? That's what you're. So it's like those are the things, dark hair. I mean, I know I got a little bit of gray, right? We know it, but it's still a little bit dark too. So, but just understanding like how are we describing the person or the intruder, or the threat, and whenever we're making that phone call. So think about that. Think about that for a second. What words are you going to use? All right, so now that you've thought about it, right, we're going to put all this together, right? So now we're going to be going to evacuation. We're going to start using the information that we just discussed in awareness and communication strategies to move to response strategies. So the first response strategy that we're going to talk about, right, is how to evacuation. What are we doing, right? So evacuate is a strategy that permits you to remove yourself from the danger. So if you have time and distance, right, that's where the information is important, right? That's where it's important that whenever we're getting that information, if I know that, like I said, we're in Oakland and the threat's on B side and I'm back in the BH side on side A, and I know that I'm not near the threat, I'm also not running to B side, but I can evacuate out of A side safely so I can get out of there. That's one of the best techniques. If you can get away from the situation, get away from the situation, right? Get away, get yourself safe. Go to a meet point. I know, talk to your site supervisors and your different emergency preparedness people to figure out where your meet point is. So just understanding that, when you're evacuating, it's okay to evacuate. It is safe. So evacuate. You do. Don't think that you have to have permission from us, right? You have permission to evacuate if it's safe to do so. When leaving, leave everything, right? You don't need to take your laptop, don't need to take anything. If you want to take anything, grab a phone, right? Right? Don't take your backpack, don't take your folders, don't take anything like that. Just get out, right? If you're evacuating and police are on scene, make sure that your hands are high, right? Hands are high and your fingers are spread above your head. Because what's happening is if you're running by police officers, right? And honestly, try to even take your cell phone out of your hand. If you're evacuating, put it in your pocket, right? Put everything in your pocket. Leave your hands clear. Leave them free of everything. Hands high, fingers spread. Run out the door. If you're running by police officers, they're scanning hands, right? They're looking. They're saying, all right, is this a threat? Is this a threat? Is this a threat? And the best thing that you can do is take yourself out of that situation and think that you're a threat. And the way you do that is it's hands high, fingers spread, run out the door, right? They're gonna evaluate people as they're coming in. And the other thing is and I mean, I'm not trying to be, brutal, but it is rough. But if you're injured and you're on the floor, don't think that the police officers are, going to stop to assist you. Their main job is to eliminate the threat. Once they eliminate the threat, then EMS will come in and they're going to assist. If you can still get out, right? Don't ever give up. Once outside, let's get to the rally point, right, that we talked about. And once you're at the rally point, have somebody take attendance, somebody who knows everybody in your office, somebody like your site supervisors or your managers and things like that in our situation. Make sure that your team's there, making sure that everyone that, if you have somebody off that day, making sure that everybody realizes who's off that day. So just making sure that we're taking a head count, just like we would do in any other situation, head counting it up. Now listen, if we're going to an evacuation point, it doesn't mean you always have to go to that point. If somebody is at your rally point and they're looking a little fishy, right? And they're like, man, I don't know if this is, right. Maybe I shouldn't go here. Trust your gut, right? Don't go there. If depending on where you are, I think our rally point in Oakland is either up in the far parking lot, up on the admin side, or down in the health department parking lot. If there's a person down there standing that just doesn't fit in or looks a little sketchy, don't go there, right? Whenever you're exiting the building, situational awareness, look around, make sure you're safe as you're exiting, right? I'm not saying it could happen, but if there's a shooter that comes in, it doesn't mean that they may be the only one. As you're leaving, right, make sure that you're also not going into a different dangerous situation. Leave with your head high, scanning the area, right, looking at where you're running to. Don't put yourself in a situation, right? Situational awareness keeps us out of danger. Something doesn't feel right, trust your gut. Lockdown. So, the goal now is just, hence lockdown, is to delay the entry into your space. And we're going to discuss and show how to control the door in the room. Okay? So this is if we can't evacuate and we're stuck. The shooter's on us. They're in the hallway. We can't get out, right? How do we lock down? What do we do? Like I said, this is when we don't have time. Or the opportunity to evacuate is not there. So we need to control that situation. We need to control the room. Lock the door if we're able. Use desk. I know we have night guards in some of our locations, right? Using tables. How do we do that? And if you get into a spot like a room that has a window and you can evacuate through that window, do so, right? If you get into a room and you're locked down and it has a window that you think you can get out of, break the window and get out. That's what we need to do. So barricade your area, right? So barricade with environmental items in your space. So we don't recommend any door locks or anything like that, right? You just never know. But for us, we use the night guard. If you don't have a night guard and you know that your door swings out or swings in, think about that. Like, look at where you're at right now. If you have a door, which way is it swinging? Does it swing out of the room? Swing in the room? So if you have a door that swings out, so out into the hallway, how would you barricade that? Take a minute, think, right? I don't know, like if we could use, if you have a belt, cables. I mean, look at all the computers that we have. Take the cables from the computer, see if we can wrap it around the door, tie it to something, tie it to your drawer, tie it to. So right now, like I'm sitting in a office doing this, and this particular door swings in, but I'm thinking, okay, what if this door swung out? How would I do this? So I'm here looking at this door and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I think I would take the cables, right, that I have, because it doesn't have a night lock. So I'd take the cables that I have and I would tie it to the door handle, and then I would probably tie it to the drawer to the desk and try to pull it, make it tight so that way they couldn't pull the door open. Listen, in a lot of situations in active shooters, research shows that it's a particular target and they want to they want to get as many mass casualties as they can, and that's horrifying. It is absolutely scary, right? If you show just even the littlest of resistance, right? The littlest of resistance that you put against the door and things like that. Normally they're going to try the door, they're going to see they can't get in, they're going to move on. So if you can barricade it, or if you can lock it, if you can put yourself in that situation, right? But whenever you do, don't also stand in front of the door, right? So if I'm sitting in this office right now, I'm going to, like I said, I will say it's swinging out. I'm going to tie the cables, right? I'm going to tie the cables to the door and then to the desk, and then I'm probably going to, well, I have a window above me, so maybe I'll try to get out of it, but if not, I'm not going to be sitting in the door. I'm going to put myself, where we're going to talk about next, in a counter situation. So just in case the shooter would be able to get to the door, how am I going to be able to fight off this intruder, right? So do I go beside the door? Do I get ready in case he tries to enter from the inside or from the side? Am I behind the door? How is the best way for us? So you need to think about that as you're in a room, right? Same thing, right? If it opens in. So like I said, mine opens in right now. How would I do this? I would try to stack as much stuff as I can in front of this door to make it difficult for him to get in, right? He's going to have to push against things. And then as he's pushing against things, you know what I mean? Then, that allows me to potentially get time that I want to counter. If that's the case, then I'm always thinking 2 steps ahead, right? I always tell people situational awareness. What are we going to do if this happens? Unfortunately for us, mass shootings and active shooters and shootings, it's just becoming a common theme. So that's why this is important to take this serious. We want to make sure that we are prepared if this ever does happen to us. Like I said, I hope it never does, right? Right, we talked about doors, how they open it, which way they open. In, out, we got jams, heavy enough things. You got filing cabinets. What do you got? How are you stopping it? Right? Do we need to, maybe one thing that we'll do is what we talked about is a go bucket. Maybe we put some rope in a bucket or something like that, right? To, try to tie door handles or try to figure out different ways. If you put some rope in your drawer in your office if your door swings out. Just try to think about this. How would you react if something would happen today and you're sitting where you're sitting? All right, so now we got the door controlled, right? We got it locked down. That's what. Now we got it locked down, right? Spread out in the room. Don't get in a corner and huddle together, right? Don't do that. Be ready. Be ready to move. Be ready to distract. Be ready to, fight if we need to, right? We don't like to use the word fight. We like to use the word counter because I don't expect anybody to fight. So be ready to counter if we would need to. And that means pick up the heaviest thing that you can throw, right? They get through that door, get ready, right? Because right now, whenever I think about this, and we're going to talk about next, right, is that if you can distract them, if you can make them lose their thought for a minute, then it gives you an opportunity, right? If you are in a room that's safe, if you're in a area that you feel like, all right, I'm locked down, call 911, right? The more people, like we talked about, the more people that can call 911, the better. And what they will do is, and I don't know if anybody's ever been in a dispatch situation, but what they'll do is, and if they hang up on you, don't worry. More than likely what happened is that they found somebody else who has better credible information, right? And they may tell you that on the line too. They may be like, all right, sir, like I have somebody who has more credible information. I'm going to let you go. Be safe. Bye, right? Or they may put you on hold, or they may, you know what I mean? So what they're doing is the phone calls that are coming in, they're processing that information as well. And they want the most credible information to be able to say, okay, where are we at? Real time. What's happening, right? So don't get upset, right? But just making sure that we're always, spread out. We're ready to counter if that happens. And that's where we're going next. Counter strategy. So the counter strategy is all about the ability to impact the intruder's brain. So you want to divide their attention, right? You don't, whenever you're thinking about something, say like, you're in the middle of doing something and somebody comes in and interrupts you, right? It may take you a second to go back to what you were doing before to realize where you were, right? That is that interruption. So it's that distraction. It's that, so in it, the human brain can only focus on one thing at a time. I know we try to say that we're great multitaskers. I'll try to say that myself. But the thing is we're just great at doing one thing at a time quickly, right? Or multiple times, right? So we can't really multitask as well. And that's the same thing. The brain doesn't let you. So the two techniques to overwhelm an intruder, right? So we're looking at distraction techniques and control techniques. So this is how we can overwhelm their process and what they're doing. So, distraction techniques. Overwhelm the decision-making process of the attacker by dividing their attention through use of distractions. Doing this will limit the attacker's ability to shoot accurately. This is accomplished by throwing an object, running, doing things, just trying to distract them. So in our demonstrations, you will see Force Science Institute research that the brain cannot perform two functions at the same time. So think of a time you were driving to an unknown location for the first time. You have your favorite song on. Man, I do this all the time, right? I have my favorite song on, I'm jamming, right? And the directions are on the GPS are playing at the same time. So next thing you know, you're getting closer to your location, right? And what's the first thing you do? That's what I do, right? Trying to see where I'm going, I'm getting closer, radio's blaring. What's the first thing I do? I'll turn down the radio, right? I don't know why, but listen, I'm seeing with my eyes, right? I'm not seeing with my ears, but at the same time, it's because your body's trying to process, your brain is trying to process all that information. So, you're getting closer, you turn the radio down. And people were like, what? Turn the radio down? Well, it's because I can see better, right? Not the case, but that's just the way that we do it, right? It's the same thing that just goes to show you that we cannot multitask whenever it comes to our attention. And as a shooter, that's what it is their attention is on people. And if we can distract them, if we can make them distracted or, do something that's going to throw them off, that's what we need to do. So counter provides time for you to use another technique or strategy. So distracting the attacker provides time for you to remove yourself from a dangerous location or render the location no longer dangerous, right? This is what. So if you're distracting someone, that gives an opportunity for you to maybe run by them or to get away from them. Or if you're in an area, or if you're in a hallway, right? Like if you can distract that person, they're not going to shoot straight. They're going to what I call is pray and spray, right? And spray and pray. And so, that's what they're just going to try to get as many objects as they can. They're not thinking straight. They're not going to shoot accurately. So you want to use environmental objects around you to make distractions, right? By using those environmental tools around you, this will be something that you can cause a distraction, giving you time to either close your distance on the attacker to take a counter, right? Or to get out of that situation. The pathway to the brain is through the visual pathway of the head or the eyes, right? You got to think, how do we see? We're seeing things and we are interpreting the things that we're seeing. So it's important to impact the intruder's field of vision. So this is by throwing objects at the intruder's face. And listen, don't be afraid you're going to hurt them, right? I know that we're going to find a day that we're going to do some real life drill scenarios. No, I'm a little worried. Don't hurt me, okay? But in real life situation, don't be afraid. Throw them, right? Don't pick up the heaviest thing, whatever you got. Think about it. Look around you right now. what would you throw? Right? I got a can of Sprite that I haven't opened yet. I might be chucking that thing, right? I got a lamp, right? Like, those are things that are around me. These are all things that I might be throwing at the intruder to try to distract them, to allow me to make up my next move. Is it get away from the danger, right? Or is it close in and try to get closer to the intruder to take a counter? So the decision-making process. This is what we call the OODA, right? The OODA. So, first O, observe. Second O, orient. The D is decide. And the A is act. So the concept was developed by a gentleman named John Boyd, who was a colonel in the United States Air Force. So basically, prior to his increase in rank, he was a light fighter bomber pilot, flying missions in the Korean War. Right, his theories led to design of the F-16. He has been described as the greatest military strategist that nobody has ever heard of, on par with Sun Tzu. And, the colonel died in 1997 from cancer. On the day of his death, he was still refining the OODA concept. So Boyd described OODA, right, OODA, as the decision-making cycle. So it's usually described very simplistically as a loop. So we just called it the OODA loop, right? So for our purposes, that's what we're going to call it. We're going to say, look at how our intruder will use the OODA loop and how we can interrupt the OODA loop by dividing his attention. As you see in this diagram, the top O is observation, and that is where they're taking in sensory information, right? You're starting your loop. So observation is everything that's happening in our universe, much like the alert analysis, right? So from that, we move to our second O, which stands for orient, right? So this is the phase that most important aspect of OODA. It's the orientation phase that we begin to make sense of the sensory input that we've received from the observation phase. So, right, we're observing here. We're taking in as much information as we can, right? Now that we have that information, how do we use that information? How do we orient ourselves to this location, right, or to the situation? And how can we best then take the strategy, right, to decide then, right, our decision phase, and how are we going to take the information that we use from the observation, now that we put it into an orient, so we are putting this into a field to decide, right, on an action. So, right, you think about that. Like, you think, okay, I am observing, right? I'm observing a classroom. Let's just say a classroom. Like, I teach BLS too. So I'm observing a classroom, and I'm getting ready to orient, right, you to doing CPR, right? So I've talked about this. We're doing this, and now I'm figuring out a way. I'm trying to decide, how can I get people to do CPR? So that's the action, right? Same thing whenever you're looking at a shooter, right? And thinking, like, as much as this is a crazy thing, but just think as a shooter for a minute. So you're observing your situation. You're coming in. You're observing your area, your environment. You're orienting yourself to it, right? You're deciding how I am going to get to where I want to get to, and then you then take the action to do that. And honestly, it's just a huge loop. So that's what we keep doing. We create the action. If the action, then we go back to observe, orient, decide, act. Observe, orient, decide, act. It's a huge loop, right? But one thing that we can do, right, is we can try to break up and distract. So whenever we distract, so according to Force Science Institute, that you will respond to an expected stimulus around 0.6 to 0.8 seconds. So it will take double that amount of time to respond to an unexpected stimulus. So what that means is like, okay, you're driving and you know that a stop sign's coming up, right? So you know that is an expected stimulus. So that takes you around 0.6 to 0.8 seconds. Think about how fast that is, right? To make a decision that you're going to stop. But say that you're driving and then a deer runs out in front of you, right? And you're not expecting that. Then your brain takes about 1.4 to 1.6 seconds to make up the mind of what you're doing, right? You're going to slam on your brakes, right? You're going to swerve, you're going to try not to go into the ditch, right? Same thing in a shooter's mentality, same thing as an intruder, right? The intruder, if there's not any stimulus, if he's just going to come in and take control of the situation, right? He's not going to have a problem in making those decisions. But if us, try to break the OODA loop, right, then that unexpected stimulus throws him off 1.4, 1.6 seconds, right? So that being the case, think about that, 1.4 to 1.6 seconds. How far can you get in 1 second, right? I don't know, 20 feet, 30 feet, right? Depending on who you are, right? How much distance can you cover? How much, what are the things that you can do? You think about that. If we can break that up, then that's what we need to do. So what we need to do, right, is we need to cause our own OODA loop. We need to distract him right here. So we need, in the observation stage, right, what can we do to distract him? And every time that you distract him, he has to go back to the observe. So every time. So that being the case, so if we break that concentration and we distract in between the observe and orient, he has to go back to the observe. If we distract him in between orient and decide, he has to go back to observe, right? So every time that we are distracting him in one of these areas, in between decide and act, he has to go back to observe. Because what is it he has to do? So if we distracting and observe, okay, things have changed. He needs to observe something differently. All right, we distract him between orient and decide. All right, well, what he observed is not the same thing that he is oriented to, so he has to go back to observe again, right? Same thing with decide. So if we distract him in between decide and action, then the action that he was going to take is not the same, so he has to go back to observe. So we need to also be trying to make distractions in decision-making process, so that way we can make him go back to observe. Every time we do this, we then make him go back to observe. We never want him to get to his action portion, right? We don't want that. All right. We're driving the car, right? So imagine this. Going down the road, sunny day, right? There's a clear sky, it's warm, you got your tunes up, jamming, right? Clear road ahead, but you're coming up to an intersection. And it's controlled by stoplights. So you see the light is green. You press a little harder on the accelerator. Turn the tunes up a little higher and keep driving, right? So you just jamming, just enjoying your day. As you're driving, as you get a little closer to the intersection, you see that the light changes from green to yellow. So now you're in that decision-making process. You're in that OODA, right? What am I going to do? So I've observed this, right? Now I'm orienting, right? So now you're going to decide to take an action. So you make a decision on which of the decision are you going to do, right? You're going to press harder on the accelerator and try to beat the light, right? You're going to press on the brake to try to stop. What are you doing? So you decide that, man, I got a nice sports car here and I'm going to speed up, right? Because I can make this light. So as you speed up and you're going down, right? What you don't realize is, oh man, there's a tractor trailer coming, right? Is he going to stop? But you can't go left because there's Girl Scout cookies being sold. Oh, and then you got kids crossing. So as you start to do this, you notice that this is what is happening to the intruder too when we want to get him to face his sensory information in the form of objects being thrown at him. So this is touch sensory. This is being hit in the face. Nobody likes that, right? I'll tell you right now, I don't like being hit in the face. I don't like being hit in general, right? So we are distracting him and making him rethink his decision-making process. We're interrupting that OODA loop, right? Same thing happens in this situation. We're observing. We see a tractor trailer. Oh, okay, what if he doesn't stop? Am I going left? No, we can't, because why? We have Girl Scouts, right? They're selling cookies. All right, well, then I'll go right. No, we can't, because they've got kids that are getting ready to cross the road. So what am I going to do, right? Same thing's happening with this intruder. He is trying to process as much information as he can. And like we said, we don't multitask, so he can only take one thing at a time to process it. So, and then we, in a decision, we act, right? So we're going to learn one of the things that we can do that is called a control technique that is called the swarm, right? And we'll get to that. That's part of our counter. So we're going to talk about the swarm as well. Before that, I'm going to ask you to look at your screen, right? And with your mouse, right, try to follow this dot as well as you can, okay? So point your mouse on the red dot, and as the dot moves across the screen, I want you to follow the dot with your mouse as best as you can, okay? You on it? Everybody following it? Keep up? Good, right? How'd you do? How successful were you, right? What part was easy and what part was difficult? It was easy when the dot was moving slow, right? But then it got difficult whenever it started moving fast. But then, not only did it start moving fast, but then you weren't able to predict its movements. So you're trying to keep up. It's the same thing as an intruder, right? The intruder is trying to observe. And if you're 1.4 seconds behind, now you may be trying to stay on that dot, and you know that's going to happen, even if you do it again, right? If we go back and we do it again, right? Stay with it best you can. Right? You've seen it twice now. Were you still able to stay on the dot? No, a lot of times you're not, right? Even though you've already seen it once, right, and you know what the pattern was, and you go back and you do it again, you may have done a little better, right? But I guarantee you that you still weren't able to stay on the dot completely. And the thing is that's what we want to create. We want to create that as people, right? As trying to survive. Like, we're evacuating. We don't want to make it easy on the intruder. If you're running at me, right, straight, I know what your predictive is, right? We're predicting that you're going to be standing in a line. But if you're making erratical movement, if you're making movements that is going to make me change, or if you're throwing off my judgment, right? It's the same thing, right? So your brain can't keep up. And the same thing with an intruder. The intruder's brain cannot keep up. So next thing we're going to do, right? The other thing is in your OODA loop, we're going to count some dots. So in this demonstration, we're going to see how the OODA works running on one full and complete loop, right? I want you to count the number of blue dots. This is not one dot moving a number of times. At the end, I will ask you how many blue dots you counted, right? So, like I said, we're going to observe, all right? We're going to orient, we're going to decide, and then we're going to act. So we're going to count these blue dots. Count them. How many did you get? Write it down. Think about it. Right? All right, so now what we're going to do, we're going to do the same thing, right? But I'm going to introduce you some yellow dots too, right? So I want you to count the blue dots and the yellow dots. And I don't want a total of number of dots, I want a total of each one. So this demonstration is going to divide your attention between two different things, right? And you will see that as the human brain can only attend to one task. And at the end, you're going to tell me how many blue dots and how many yellow dots you count. Okay, and I want them separate. You ready? Here we go. Perfect. How many did you get? Yeah. How many of you just gave up halfway through because you're like, forget this, right? The first time I saw this, I was like, I think I can do this. And about halfway through, you're like, what number was I on again? Right? So everybody has their numbers. All right, how many blue dots do you think there were? There was 11. How many yellow dots do you think there were? Also 11. If you got that, then you guys are awesome, right? But I know the first time I did, it's hard, right? You're distracted. You're trying to keep up with one another. You're like, okay, how many blues, how many yellows, and you're trying to go back and forth. You can't multitask in that sense, right? So now we're going to talk about control, right? This is that swarm. So grabbing and controlling the appendages of the intruder, right? This will give others or yourselves time to evacuate. But also, if you can evacuate, you can control the intruder from him using his weapon. This is accomplished by grabbing and controlling the arms, right? This is a personal decision and can be accomplished with many people, and you will control the two arms and the two legs and the head, right? This technique can be used by high school students, adults, anybody, right? We try to teach this in the Alice training to individuals probably 13 years or older, right? That's what, and we try to keep this technique. So this is wrapping your arms, basically you're hugging, right? You're hugging their appendages, their extremities, right? And you're pressing your body weight and just dropping to the ground. And then when you want to hold the head down too. So whenever you're compressing the head, you need to press the head directly down on around the ears as if you're performing like CPR without the compressions. So we will look at this whenever we do our live drill, right? But this is a really good thing that if we're able to control this, if we're able to swarm this person, I guarantee you that all it takes is probably about 3 people to control a situation. So now that you've controlled the situation, what do? Right? You got to secure the weapon. So normally what we say is that you don't ever want to be caught with a weapon in your hand. Do not hold it, right? Because like we talked about before, when the police are coming in, right? They're coming in, what are they looking for? They're looking for hands, right? And if you have a weapon in your hand, unfortunately the assumption is you're going to be the shooter, right? And that may not be the case. So don't ever hold the weapon. So what we always say is if you have a trash can, I know, look around and we have a lot of these small little black trash cans, put the weapon in the trash can, flip it upside down, right? Have somebody sit on the trash can, right? Don't ever hold the weapon in your hand. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. I know, like I said, it's a little bit different than what we've ever done for a training purpose. So this is going to be a 2-part training. So this first part is more of the classroom setting, education, PowerPoint. And then we are going to be doing a actual hands-on shooting drill. And I'll be coming around and we're going to try to put what we learned here today to test, right? So if you have questions about any of this, write them down, right? Write them down, and then next time you see me, ask, right? So Nancy and I are both ALICE certified. So if you see Nancy around too, you can ask her, right? So what you're going to be doing now is after you take this, I'm going to be getting together with your site supervisors, and we're going to pick a day, and we're going to come around, and we're actually going to do some active shooter drills. Okay? Like I said, questions, please write them down, right? I want to answer all your questions. So thank you. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that, like I said, this is a little different. I hope it wasn't too bad. I would love the feedback. If there's anything you need or any questions you have, please let me know.